Jessie Young, welcome to the podcast. It is fantastic to have you here. Just one day ago, I was watching the recording of you and your racing partner, Cam Smith, representing Team USA in the SKIMO World Cup competition over there in Spain. And I have to say, Jessie, as they went through the participants in the A final, I think this is like, you can tell us, I think it's like maybe the 10 or 12 fastest qualifying times. Team USA got a team in that A final, which I think is a great accomplishment. And on the screen, this is the ISMF YouTube stream where they currently cover these things. It says the names of each athlete, and then following the name, it says their birth year. And there's a lot of birth years, late 90s, early 2000s, even some mid 2000s. Jessie, I'm going down the list. First of all, I didn't know who made the A final. And I'm like, Cam Smith and Jessie Young, yes, they made the final. And then I look at the birth years and I'm like 1983. And I say this, Jessie, with a lot of pride, because I was born in 1983 as well. But there's mostly, yeah, it's a good year. Mostly people, like I said, late 90s. And Jessie, you're right there in the mix, at an age older than most of the competitors. I mean, you're not an old person, but you're racing at the highest level in these short, fast races where there's a lot of high end speed, and you're making it happen. And also you have many other things in your life. You're a parent as well. I think you can tell us, I don't know, your kid's 3 and 6, something like this. You're making it happen. So anyway, and here you are, you're back. That was like 2 days ago, right? You did a couple World Cups. Now I think you're back home in the Aspen area. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It does feel like a whirlwind that there was only a couple days ago that we were racing in Spain. But it is, yeah, we hopped on a plane after or drove to Barcelona and then hopped on a plane, and now I'm back in my daily life on Zoom meetings and headed to the office tomorrow, and life is back to where it was. Um, But yeah, it's kind of funny when Nikki La Rochelle, who's a former teammate of mine that was on the World Cup team for a long time, and Sarah Cookler, who's now the head of sport for the USSMA or United States Ski Mountaineering Association, both were texting me kind of in the early summer, like, we think you should come back and do these races and see if you have what it takes. And it took me a while to come around to the idea, but I think in June or July, I kind of like started upping my intensity and doing some hill sprints and hill repeats in the summertime. And then in October, I was like, okay, well, if I'm really going to do this, I'm going to need a coach who I hired one of your good friends to kind of give me some guidance and see if I have what it takes to kind of stick in there. And so I hired Josiah Middaugh, I'm probably saying his name wrong, to equip me with a training plan to optimize for my handicaps, such as my age, and really try to do what I can with the limited time that I have. And so it's been a fun adventure since October, um, getting to, make the qualifiers and see what it takes to compete over in Europe with the young kids.
Yeah, it's awesome. I know, isn't it? It's funny how that perspective changes. Like, when I was a young athlete, people would use the word kid. I'd be like, "What do you mean? I'm not a kid." And here we are. It's like, oh man, they're all like kids. But it's kind of cool though, huh? I can imagine over there with Team USA. Most of the athletes are younger than you. Do you find yourself in, whether it's by design or just de facto, is there kind of a mentoring sort of role? I think you've been to Europe a lot, whether it's with Team USA SKIMO, whether it's doing the Grand Tours and other things. Are you kind of doing some of that, I don't know, leadership coaching, just telling people how it works?
Gosh, I wish I could say that I was, but I'm mostly looking to these other kids to tell me what to do.
Okay.
you know, um, it's such a different thing than some of these other races that I've participated in the past.
Mm,
So it's kind of like, well, what are the best strategies to do these transitions fast, and what tweaks do you need to make to your pack or your suit. Then, I'm calling up Griffin, who's the 18-year-old or 19-year-old on the team, like,
Yep.
what did you do? And how do I do this better? So, in some ways, it's kind of going the reverse for this new format that I'm not as used to.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's really neat to hear. And for the listeners, that new format, we got the sprint races, a 3-minute race. The one I was watching you and Clemens, the mixed team relay kind of. Well, tell us what's the format of that one, and are you enjoying it? Are you finding it interesting?
uh, yeah. So this new mixed relay is one of the two um, Olympic disciplines that they've decided to go with. And I think there's some pros and cons to it. I think you got to watch one on replay the other day or yesterday, and my husband was up watching it, and I think it does lend itself to some spectator qualities. Um, but it basically takes ski mountaineering and condenses it into this race format where it's one female and one male racer. And it starts out with a qualification lap or a time trial where each racer goes 30 seconds apart for their fastest lap. And then they add their combined times from the male and female. And it's the top 12 countries that then make it into an A final. So even if, say, France or Switzerland, who have some of the top team athletes, that maybe their top 3 athletes were 1, 2, and 3, only their top one would be in the A final. So it's not necessarily the top 12 finishing teams, it's the top 12 countries. So we might have been a little bit farther down on the list than 12 in our qualifying time. But and so then they take the A final, and then the women lead in a group of 12 going at one time. So racing head to head in this race. So anyway, the female group leads and then hands off to it's a track that includes going uphill for about like 3 or 4 minutes, down a preset kind of uh, slalom course into a transition where then you go up again, and there's a foot part or a boot pack, as we call it in the US, and over in Europe they're referring to it as the foot part,
Mm.
where you take off your skis, put them on your back, and proceed on foot, and then transition again to skis before you do final transition coming down another slalom path, and then there's like a kind of silly last transition where you put your skins on again and then do a final dash to the finish where you change to your partner. And so you do that process twice. So it's a lot of transitions. I think I've heard a lot of people kind of talk about it similar to a biathlon where you're kind of
Mm. Hmm.
at your max heart rate, having
Yeah.
to kind of execute these other functions when you're kind of in a state where you're just kind of everything's elevated and there's a lot of room for errors and stuff. And I certainly found that myself in these last couple races. And I think there's a lot of room to improve, hopefully, and cut down on some of those seconds that matter.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, thanks for explaining that. I hadn't thought of that biathlon comparison, but that makes sense because you're totally maxed out, and every second or half a second matters. Getting your boot into the binding, getting the skins off, and then back on very quickly. And I can imagine, as with biathlon, there's a balance of, ski hard, but maybe not totally maxed out so that you can shoot well. Are you thinking in terms of that? Save whatever, save an extra 2 beats per minute so that I can do a transition, with a little bit more cognition, or do you just get the transition so dialed that hopefully you can nail it even without thinking, because you can't think straight because your brain's coming out your nose.
Yeah, I think the latter. I mean, I think it's got to be, I think we've got to nail those and practice them more and more so that we can get them to be second nature. But yeah, it's just you don't have a brain when you're at that point in your race. So having it function as smoothly as possible is the goal.
Yeah. Nice. So let's take a step back, Jesse. You said, your friends are saying make a comeback. Sarah Cookler, head of sport for USA SKIMO, Nikki La Rochelle, kind of a household name, at least in this skiing world. I've seen your name and Nikki's and, some of these other men and women who have been on the podium at events like the Power of Four. It seems to me kind of our entire adult lives, including your husband, Max Tam. I mean, he's been up there doing this stuff forever. Like you guys have been doing this stuff a long time. Tell me about that comeback. Like what are we talking here? Did you have a full on gap or gaps in your racing and competing? Like what's that looked like, over the last, I don't know, I think you've been a parent, 6 or so years? Like what's that looked like for you?
Yeah. So back, I was on the national team for ski mountaineering, and it was kind of an every other year event where we would go over to the World Championships as a team from 2015, 2017, and 2019. And at
Nice.
2019, I had already had my first kid, Ryder, and he came with us, and I kind of had that extra mom strength, I like to think, that fueled me through that portion. But I never was totally out of the sport. I just kind of was focusing on the longer distance stuff and, um, some of the more adventurous initiatives and that sort of thing. And my husband and I are always touring in our backyard and the mountains out here. So certainly never was, totally out of it, but had kind of decided that I wasn't going to do any more World Cup kind of racing or World Championships racing until I kind of got their calls saying, let's just see if you can do it and give it a chance. And I just caved. I caved to the peer pressure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully positive peer pressure. Those previous world championships, Jesse, am I right? The format in those, were you doing more the traditional ski mountaineering, the what we call the individual race? Talking, varies. Could be 90 minutes, 2 hours, 2.5, maybe longer, but long climbs, long descents, technical, boot pack, couloirs, ridge lines. Were you doing all those? Like, did you ever do a sprint race, up until this year?
Yeah, no, there were both what you're saying, the teams and the individual, which are still the formats that I think are more of interest to me personally. But they also did have a sprint race, a vertical, and a relay. The relay was a little bit different back then. It was kind of I think it was 3 men and 1 woman, and everybody
Mm,
just did one lap.
okay.
So, but there was kind of I think even at that time they were kind of thinking toward the Olympics and what kind of kind of testing race formats that would be more appropriate for that kind of a venue. So they had kind of integrated those in, and I participated in those as well. All race experience I think is good experience no matter the distance. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think I saw along the way you won the Leadville Silver Rush 50 mountain bike race at least once. So what else? Have you been trail running? Did you, let's say the Power Four, your local thing in Aspen? Did you ever do the run and the bike with that, or other things as well?
yeah, I've done the run and the bike for that Power Four race and the ski mountaineering ones whenever I've been in town. I've always been a popular race for me. Yeah, I did the Silver Rush 50 and then got qualified there for the Leadville 100, which I did, and I don't know if I'll ever do that one again. I had a really rough race, but it was
Okay. Was that
fun to check it off
2023
the
or?
bucket list.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
was, yeah, 2020, not last summer, but the summer before.
Couple years ago. Say more about that. The Silver Rush 50, for those who don't know, it's kind of, it's more of a real mountain bike race. It's steep. It's not single track, but double track, lots of baby heads, like you're going fast, semi-technical. The 100 mile, is kind of a bit more like a gravel race. You're riding in a Peloton, sitting on wheels. What was? Tell us about it. Like what didn't go well, or why didn't you like it?
Yeah, I think that just exactly what you've just said is why
Yeah.
I liked the Silver Rush 50. It's more of that real mountain bike race and kind of a test of your own skill level and what if you can kind of grind it out. And the Leadville is way more strategic, and I think I made a lot of uh, amateur errors being my first year doing it. Getting on a wheel of a group of three guys and trying to take poles when I should have just looked
Mm,
behind me and sat up and rode on the back of a pack of 20. I
yeah.
like burned all my matches in
Yep.
the wrong spots, and then by the time I got to the areas that I usually consider my strength, like climbing up the Columbine climb, which usually I think would have been a good spot for me to gain some places, I was just spent and had nothing. I also like changed all my fueling the day before or whatever.
Mm,
So there were some amateur errors that didn't help me with that
yeah.
one, but it was fun to give it a go. It's such a production, so it was good to do it. But I don't know that I need to go back.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes we do something and just once is enough. Like, um, yeah, and that's funny. The classic changing the fueling strategy morning of or day before. Like we all know, like you don't do this, and sometimes we do it still.
Sometimes we do, but
Yeah. So what about like back to October? Your friends pressure you. Okay, let's go for it. I think maybe the first hurdle was the U.S. SKIMO National Championships. Am I right about that? Which I guess was sometime in January, right at the Powder Keg race in Utah. And I think you had the sprint there. You had maybe the teams thing as well. Like what flipped there, or you start training in October with Coach Josiah. I mean, what are you doing? Like, is it VO2 max work? Is it explosivity? Is it hope the snow falls? What were you doing for the next couple months there?
that's a good question. I talked to a lot of coaches and different experts, whether they're coaches or not coaches, about how to optimize for this and prepare for that January 8th race. And a lot of them are like, well, you're really too late. Like, for what I would recommend, like, I would have had you doing, that explosive strength work over the summer. And then by this time, you'd be like refining your engine kind of thing. And it was like, well, that ship has sailed and we've got to make do with what we've got. So, I skipped over or didn't have time to do a lot of, like, I think the strength work and some of that explosive work that would probably have benefited me greatly to to have integrated earlier in the season. And then kind of, because once you're into the racing blocks, there's kind of, it's my understanding that that's not as big of a focus once you're going from race to race and looking for that speed. So we kind of skipped over some of those things that would have been ideal to have had time to integrate, and just went into kind of, yeah, the shorter intervals and working on threshold and VO2 max workouts, kind of getting used to the training lingo. I still feel like I don't even know some of the different things that I'm
That's all
going
right.
going out to try to do, but I try to hit the heart rate zones and, you know, do what I can to um, prepare for those kind of key workouts. I think generally I've got like 2 key workouts a week, and the rest is easier zone 1, zone 2 kind of stuff, which is always fun.
Excellent. That's a cool story, Jesse. And I think it's, yes, there's something to be said for like, doing all these building blocks over weeks, months leading up to something. I also think there's something said for A, being like fresh and excited, and B, another thing you have is just having years of experience. So a lot of that, the so-called base, like whether or not you've like done these specific workouts or races or whatever in the last year or 6 months, there's something to be said for what's there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Nice. Well, and it worked. You won the national championship, right, in the sprint race. I watched that. That was cool. Congrats on that. How did that feel? Were you at all I don't know, surprised? Was it what you expected? Again, a lot can happen. There's a lot of people can be right there. One little mistake, you go from first to fifth or whatever. How'd you feel?
Yeah, that one was interesting. There was definitely some strategy at play there because I think there was enough women that we all would move on to the semifinal. So I kind of used that first lap as a warm up, knowing that we all were going to make it anyway. And then, but even then, like I got passed by the girl that started behind me, Brooke Haynes, who's been really focused on the sprint and I think has a really good, strong engine. And my husband, who was watching online and called me afterward, was like, "You just couldn't help yourself. Like you picked it up when you shouldn't have like picked it up when she passed you." And I was like, "I know, I just couldn't let her go so easily."
Yeah, a race is a race, right?
A race is a race. I had to like try, but I tried to kind of hold it back in those qualification rounds so that I could kind of execute a smooth and fast final lap, which I think was a strategy that ended up working for me. But that's not the case. We can't really use that same strategy in the European races where everybody is a lot faster and there's no holding back, or you don't, we found out, yeah, in Spain, you don't get out of the qualification rounds if you don't put it all out there um on the qualification. So uh in the race in Spain, not one American female made it out of the qualification lap. um so we've really got to, as a team, work to increase that sheer speed. But the sprint is a lot simpler because there's not, it's really just that top transition. um well, there's the boot pack and then a top transition, but you don't have to do the skins on transition. um so it's a lot more streamlined and focused on that just kind of sheer uphill downhill.
Yeah, that is a dynamic element, which, again, watching that U.S. Nationals, it seemed to me that you did a great job of, you got these multiple heats, pace yourself, make sure you go on, but use the minimum, not what you did in the Leadville 100 bike, like save those matches, right? You did a great job with that. And I think you're also right about just the level in Europe. Ski mountaineering is high. I noticed doing the research. I think you've been top 5 at the Pierramenta race, which is, I think, fantastic because that's a huge race. It feels like Leadville 100. Actually, it feels like the Tour de France. I mean, thousands of people. It's wild. But you've been up there in the Europe races. Tell us about that. People who don't know about Pierramenta, like what should they know? Why should they research it? Maybe think about doing it, even if they're, you don't have to be super elite. If you can find the logistics, pay the entry fee, you can go there and do it. Why should people think about something like that?
uh it is the Tour de France, but you can enter as just a citizen, which I think is a really cool way to do it. So yeah, I think my partner Janelle Smiley, who lived in Jackson at the time and is up in BC now and is a super strong athlete, um, we partnered and went over after one of the World Championships years to do that race. And there's nothing like it. I like to say the last, it's a 4-day stage race, so your times are cumulative for that final winning time. And they have their A, B, and C race, or like kind of depending on the weather and the conditions, they can execute one of those. And even their C or D race would be like way beyond what the power of four ever is.
Yes.
It's like
Yep.
the terrain that they have access to is just incredible. And they set, dueling skin tracks for miles Um, and it's just a really incredible thing. You've got your harness on, it, so there's more of a mountaineering element. And the races, I think, I was just looking back at this, I think they're like generally 3 to 4 hours a day, depending on where you are in the pack. They could be much longer, but I think kind of toward the front of the pack, 3 to 4 hours a day, and then a shorter one on the last day. Um, but my favorite memory was the last day of the race. They have kind of a famous ridge line where all the Europeans go up to spectate, and I remember kind of waking up in our hotel, and there were all these like ski boot sounds outside the window, and I was like, Max, like, we're late, we've got to go. And I come to this realization that, oh no, that's the spectators who have started way before dawn to walk up
Like
to
5
get to the
a.m.
ridge
Yep.
early so that they can, drink their wine and have their baguettes and cheese sandwiches. And I mean, it was such a cool atmosphere to race through, and so much excitement around the sport. It was just, yeah, pretty incredible to be part of that. I hope to do it again for sure.
Yeah. Oh man, great story. I was lucky enough to go. Jesse, I had the same experience. Like hearing those people 5 a.m. and to be a spectator, you got to go to this little town of Aresh. You got to take a ski lift way up, and then they have to skin or hike another 2,000 feet. And there's like, I mean, what, 3,000 people up there or something? Just mind blowing.
It's insane. It was a very cool experience, and yeah, it's part of the town's culture. And yeah, I mean, I think like Leadville, the whole town kind of gets into
Yeah.
it, and it's part of what they do. So,
Yeah.
but I think as
Yeah.
far as like somebody wanting to do it, it's like a affordable, great way to see Europe. Like your race fee includes your food, your lodging, and a plate and a massage for your everyday. So I
Excellent.
think there's no better way to do it.
Yeah. Nice. Well, from the experience back to the competition, Jesse, when you're, that little kind of peer pressure from your friends there, hey, come out, try the nationals, which you did. You got to go to the World Cup, do some of these. Um, in that thinking, Jesse, was there thoughts of the Olympics? A little over a year from now, 2026, SKIMO's making a debut. There's still uncertainty about will the U.S. have athletes? Who will those athletes be, if any? But was that part of your motivation? I mean, I hear the word Olympics and I'm like, man, that's awesome. Like, how did that play for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely there in the distance for sure as something that would be pretty awesome. I mean, of course, like I don't know, every kid I think watches the Olympics and is like, oh, how can I get there someday? And I certainly put myself in that group. And if there is a possibility, I'd love to go for it. I don't know. It's going to be hard for the U.S. we I think the way it works out now is we have to be I think our best chance of getting an Olympic spot, which is not guaranteed for the US, is to get what's called a continental quota. Um, and so that's all of North and South America, which really comes down to the US and Canada, because I don't think Chile has two strong enough athletes, or at least they haven't shown up yet. Um, so it's really the US and Canada have to beat or duel it out for World Cup points this season to determine which of us will get that continental quota. And so that was kind of the goal of these last 2 weekends, was to beat Canada, and we did it narrowly. And I don't think it's at all a guarantee that we can do it at every race. I think there's so many factors, and I think they've got some really strong athletes that uh, if they both bring their A game, it's going to be really hard to beat them. So it'll be an exciting World Cup season. I think everybody's like, yeah, well, the race didn't focus on the end of the 11th and 12th place finalists didn't didn't get the screen time, but it was for us. I think it came down to the wire in this last race in Spain. I think the U.S. team that I was on with Cam won by like 6 seconds, and it came down to his final transition against the Canadian guy. We're in there at the same time, and so it was really edge of your seat kind of final, and we were able to pull it off. So we beat them in the 2 World Cup races that I was just at, one in Andorra and one in Spain. So we're on the leaderboard just barely, and it's going to be a lot of work to keep that going for the rest of the season and try to eke out that spot. And then beyond that, I don't know what the selection will be. I don't think they've necessarily determined it for what Olympic athlete would go in February.
Yeah. Wow. Well, go USA. Yeah, watching that race, Jessie, there was like a split second where they showed you and the Canadian woman right together, and then at the finish line, they show the top teams and they're stacking up, and like they hardly even said anything. I think they actually said that they said Canada beat US. I think I know they were
I
right
do think
together. I
they
think
said that.
yeah, I think the announcer maybe got a bit, easy mistake. So we're recording this early February. Like you said, there's been a number of World Cups. There's still a number of them this spring. I think there's a test event in Italy. I know at the end there's one in Norway. What else is there? Another one in, I don't know, a couple more. How's that look for you personally? Like you said, you got the Zoom calls, you got work, you got a couple little kids. Like, are you going back and spending the rest of the spring in Europe, or part of it, or will other U.S. athletes continue doing these, trying to stack up the points? How's that looking?
Our limiting factor is the number of women on our team. So if we had more women, we could have more men's mixed relays out there, I think. I'm not sure how many teams we can actually enter into these. But there's about 5 or 6 women that are competitive on the U.S. team. And so I think we plan to put as many of us out there as we can at the races going forward for the rest of the season. As far as my race plans, I am planning on going back to Europe if I get it approved by my boss. And, I've got a really supportive husband who's excited about the sport and me participating. And so he's willing to take on the kid responsibilities. And hopefully, maybe they come meet me over there for spring break. But for sure, I'm kind of committed to doing the Bormio race mid-February, and then the World Championships, which would follow kind of that first week of March.
Yep. Okay. Cool. And how, training wise, how does it look now? You just had a couple weeks in a row with races, travel, etc. Is it like kind of take some recovery time here and then hopefully get in a bit of quality training before you go back, or I don't know. Sometimes with parenting work, it's just like damage control. Do what you can, day to day. Quote
Yeah.
recovery, like, yeah, sure. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like barely look ahead at my training peak schedule to see what I should be doing. But I think I had a recovery skin tomorrow and some intervals toward the end of the week, and yeah, we'll see. I think I really need to look at both. I definitely there's gains to be had in just getting those transitions really nailed.
Mm.
Um, but I think uphill fitness is still important, and then also just working on downhill technique. I had my friend Anda, who used to be a World Cup skier, take me out for a couple of runs before I left town to try to teach me how to run gates better, which might be a
Mm.
lost cause. But there's always something to be gained there. So, trying to work on all these different skills that it takes to bring together a successful race.
Yeah. So dynamic. When you went out and did that gate training with the World Cup athlete, were you doing that on your skinny skis, the race skis, 65 underfoot? I assume you got to practice like you play with those puppies.
Yeah, we talked about whether, I mean, I don't even own a downhill setup. All I have is um, backcountry gear or the race setup. So it wasn't really an option to train on anything else. I think from her perspective, she thought, trying to put on some alpine skis and really feel what that feels like would be beneficial at some point. Um, But yeah, nope. I just went out on my little race toothpicks and gave it my all.
Yeah. Yeah, good for you. Did you grow up skiing, Jesse? I think I saw somewhere snowboarding. I think are you from the Aspen area? So you've probably been on snow your whole life, but were you ever ski racing alpine style?
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I mean, when I was really young, like six, I, did some of the little races, but then I kind of transitioned to snowboarding for the bulk of my youth, and then after college, really was when I was like, I'm done snowboarding, and I'd like to, you know, get into the backcountry, and I think the only reasonable tool to do that is really skis. So I kind of tried to relearn how to ski and um, yeah, put snowboarding behind me.
Yeah,
But
nice.
yeah,
Cool.
I never skied gates or alpine skied.
Yep. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's been a
How
fun thing to learn.
Yeah, good for you. How about risk tolerance out there, Jesse? And this could be in the back country, wanting to ski fun, steep stuff. But as we know, especially in Colorado, snowpack can be very unstable. Or in a race, I mean, if people watch these SKIMO World Cups, I mean, there people were skiing fast, like you said, skinny skis. Some of those corners are chattery and icy, and there's some sketchy passes going on with that. Do you think in terms of risk tolerance, and especially as a parent, I think for a lot of us that can change just how we think about risk. Has there been a shift for you in any ways?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think there was a shift after having kids. I mean, I think I've always been pretty conservative in backcountry decision making and waiting until the spring snowpack and stuff before I'm really going out and doing peaks and stuff like that. I like to see low low avalanche risk across the board before I head out. So I try to make decisions as wisely as I can in that regard, and that doesn't, you know, can't prevent everything, but I think trying to be as conservative as I can while still getting out there is important to me. I think it's something that my husband and I both enjoy doing and feel that we can do safely if we take the necessary precautions. And um, so it's something that we definitely do, but are cognizant of the consequences and want to play it as safely as we can. In the race format, I think I don't even think about getting hurt, or it's not on the radar. It's just go as fast as we can. But I do think, yeah, there's like, especially in like the races like the Power of Four and where you're kind of in that more less structured environment coming down. I do feel like I've kind of taken it back a little bit to what I was
Mm.
doing before kids because getting injured as a parent is going to make life a lot more challenging.
Yeah, no kidding, huh?
So
Yeah.
there's a little bit more self-preservation going on in my mind than maybe there was pre-kids.
Yeah, yeah. How about the interplay of being a parent of younger kids with the racing and work? I mean, how does that all go? Like, do you ever encounter limiting stories, or wondering, I find myself at times where, man, like, can I do this? Or, I have too much going on, or it's all overwhelming, or whatever. There can be those challenging stories, or and there can be empowering stories, like, I know for me sometimes, if and when I get to a race, I'm like, shit, I love this. And it's kind of easy compared to like the day to day of parenting. Like, I just got to go out and like hammer for a while. Like, this is awesome. What do you find your experience self experiencing with those kind of things, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, I think the day-to-day life parenting and working and trying to train is certainly a lot harder than the last 2 weeks I just spent racing in Europe, where the hotel cooks, it's full board hotel living, and you go out and train and come back and your meals are cooked and there's not a dish to clean. And uh, we've got somebody, we had Stefano from Italy doing our ski tech work and waxing our skins. So I didn't
Mm.
have to do any of that stuff. And everything was kind of taken care of. It's kind of a really nice life to live. If I could have my kids there with me, that would solve everything. But definitely it is, um, weighing being away and how much time away is worth it. And those are definitely things that weigh on me. And I don't think I have the answer yet for this all being so new. But
Yeah.
it's a quick burn. I think, trying to trying to help the US with getting this spot for the Olympic quota, I think is really the goal. And that's, you know, just goes through March. And then, so it's something that I feel like is pretty finite. I'm not really contemplating continuing this for the next 4 years. So, so it's more manageable to kind of put it into that kind of a perspective where it can give it a push, give it my all for these next couple months, and then yeah, go back to life.
That's awesome, Jesse. Especially you said October you decided to do this. I mean, October through March, like 6 months. Like, what a cool, I think it's awesome. Like, work really hard for, like you said, a finite amount of time and try to make this outcome happen for Team USA. That's super cool. How does it feel amongst, you got all these team athletes basically, like you said, trying to accrue points to get a spot in the Olympics? Likely, I think, like one man and one woman. So there'll be all these people who worked their ass off, did all these races, all this travel, who won't get to go. Um, how how does that feel? How does that sit? I can imagine, like, it's both really cool and I can imagine challenging, and maybe a bit of both.
Yeah, I mean, I think for other athletes on the team, I think there's more hope, for you know the next Olympic cycle and that sort of thing, and that this round is giving people experience for that. For me, there's no way that I would make the next Olympic cycle. So it is really just kind of trying to help with this one goal. But I do think hopefully that the other people, especially the younger younger ones, are seeing this as just a launching point for future years. And the more experience racing, the better, I think, for a lot of them. But it is fun to kind of be a part of this team and have this shared goal, and everybody's efforts going to it is really cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of people I know who care about you guys and are rooting for you. And obviously, SKIMO is still a fairly niche kind of thing, but I know there's a lot of people who are behind you. And I hope that you guys feel that when you're out there, at these events.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's cool. It's cool to have the excitement building around the sport.
Well, Jesse, this has been super helpful. We sure appreciate you taking the time, like I said, amidst your work, coming off the plane, managing kid stuff, lingering illness. It's a lot going on. And I know just people love it. It's unique to hear, I think, from an athlete right in the midst of all that. So thanks a ton for taking the time. And any final things you want to share with the audience, whether it's related to SKIMO or words of wisdom, advice, what else?
No, I mean, I think, it's been fun since you kind of reached out to me. I've been listening to some of your other podcasts and things on mental toughness and those kind of things. I think are super fun to kind of take some deep dives into, the nutrition and aging athletes and so many things. The parenting balance, I think so many of those podcasts ring true for across all types of sports. So those have been fun to listen to and have kind of, sent me on different research chains. So it's been fun. So no, I mean, I don't have anything else to add other than just thank you for having me. I'm honored to be on your podcast, and um, yeah, happy to
Well,
see ski mountaineering make a go for it.
yeah, I know. Here we go. Well, Jesse, thanks for listening. Sure appreciate it. Final question. Jesse Young, why should people ski uphill?
Because that's the best way to get to the down.
All
No, no,
right.
no.
I love it. Best way to get to the down. Cool. Thank you, Jesse. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Travis.